The lion had never known freedom. For as long as he could remember, his world had been a small, rusted cage. Cold iron bars, concrete floors, the scent of filth and fear, it was all he had ever known. The roar of a crowd, the sharp crack of a whip, the endless cycle of hunger and obedience. He had no name, only a number. To the circus, he was nothing more than an attraction, a beast to be controlled. He had spent years in chains, performing tricks he did not understand, jumping through fiery hoops, cowering at the sound of his trainer's voice. And then, one day, it all stopped. The authorities had finally shut down the traveling circus that had kept him captive for more than a decade. The trainers were arrested, the cages unlocked. But even as hands reached out to help, the lion did not move. He did not understand what was happening. He had never known kindness. Animal rescuers spoke in soft voices, their hands gentle as they worked to move him from the only prison he had ever known. But the lion did not fight them. He had learned long ago that resistance only led to pain. He was taken away, to where he did not know. The cage he was placed in was different. Cleaner, warmer, with fresh straw beneath his paws instead of cold concrete. But it was still a cage. He did not believe in anything else. And then, one day, the door opened. He hesitated. It was a trick. It had to be. He had been forced into so many unnatural things before. But there were no whips, no shouting trainers, no roaring crowds. Only silence. And beyond the open door, something he had never seen before. A vast, endless space. Green, open, alive. His first step into the wild was hesitant. He did not understand what he was seeing. He did not understand the sky without a ceiling, the grass beneath his paws, the scent of something pure and untamed. And then, for the first time in his life, the lion did something no one had ever heard from him before. He roared, not in fear, not in pain, but in something else entirely: freedom. The sound of his roar echoed through the vast open space, unlike anything he had ever known. It was not the forced, hollow sound he had been trained to make for performances. It was raw, deep, and filled with something he didn't even understand yet. Something ancient, something his. The rescuers stood at a distance, watching in silence. They had seen animals released before: bears, elephants, tigers, but this was different. This lion had been broken for so long that none of them had known what to expect. Would he be too afraid to step out? Would he freeze in place, unable to comprehend a world beyond bars? But instead, he had roared. It sent a shiver down their spines, not out of fear, but out of something else entirely: awe. The lion took another step, his massive paws sinking into the grass. The sensation startled him. His entire life had been spent on metal and concrete. He had never felt the earth beneath him, never touched something so soft, so real. He lowered his head, sniffing the ground, his nostrils flaring as new scents flooded his senses. The grass, the dirt, the trees in the distance, it was overwhelming. He looked up, blinking against the brightness of the open sky. He had never seen the sky like this before, not without bars or a tent overhead. For a long time, he just stood there, his body still, his mind racing. The rescuers didn't move, giving him space, letting him process what was happening. Then, slowly, something remarkable happened. The lion crouched down, pressing his body against the earth. His muscles tensed as if he were preparing to leap, but he didn't. Instead, he rolled. The rescuers gasped. He rolled onto his back, twisting in the grass, his paws swiping at the air like a playful cub, his golden mane spread out around him, soaking in the warmth of the sun. And then, for the first time in his entire life, the lion purred. It was deep and rumbling, a sound no one had ever heard from him before. Not in the circus, not in captivity. It was a sound of contentment, of relief. He was no longer a performer, no longer a prisoner. For the first time in his life, he was simply a lion. The lion lay there for a long time, his body sinking into the soft earth as if he were afraid it might disappear beneath him. The warmth of the sun seeped into his fur, touching parts of him that had only ever known the cold of metal bars and the rough grip of chains. The rescuers watched in silence, some with their hands over their mouths, others with tears in their eyes. They had seen animals regain their freedom before, but something about this was different. This lion had spent over a decade in captivity, forced to perform under the threat of a whip. And yet, here he was, rolling in the grass like a cub, as if reclaiming every moment of joy that had been stolen from him. Then, slowly, he rose to his feet. His muscles, stiff from years of confinement, stretched in ways they never had before. He took another cautious step forward, his massive paws pressing into the ground, leaving imprints in the soil. He sniffed the air again, and this time his ears perked up. Something was calling to him. Beyond the open field, a line of trees swayed in the wind, their branches whispering secrets of a world he had never known. He took another step, then another. His movements were slow, deliberate, each step hesitant yet filled with an unspoken longing. And then, for the first time in his life, he ran. It wasn't graceful, not at first. His legs wobbled slightly, unaccustomed to freedom. But as he gained momentum, something inside him seemed to awaken. His strides lengthened, his muscles remembered their purpose, and soon he was sprinting across the field, his mane wild in the wind. The rescuers held their breath, watching in awe. The lion ran as if he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. His paws barely touched the ground before he leaped forward again, no longer restrained by chains or the weight of his past. He wasn't running away, he was running toward something, toward himself. When he finally stopped, he turned his head, looking back, not at the people who had saved him, but at the cage in the distance, the one he had called home for so many years. He stared at it for a long time, his golden eyes unreadable. Then, with a slow blink, he turned away. He never looked back again. As the lion turned away from the past that had caged him, something deep inside him shifted. For the first time, he was making his own choice. No whips, no shouting, no commands forcing him into action. The rescuers watched in stunned silence. Some had worked in animal rescue for years, but none had seen a moment like this. A creature who had known nothing but chains, finally understanding what it meant to be free. Dr. Karen Monroe, the lead wildlife specialist on the team, wiped at the corner of her eye before speaking softly to the others. "Let him go. Don't call him. Don't try to bring him back. He needs this." The team nodded, stepping back even farther to give him space. The lion walked slowly now, his tail flicking gently behind him. He reached the edge of the clearing where the tall grass met the line of trees. He paused, tilting his head slightly, listening. For the first time in his life, the only sounds around him were natural ones. No deafening music, no clanging cages, no roaring crowds. Just the wind rustling through the trees, the distant chirping of birds, the gentle hum of a world that had never belonged to him until now. He took a step into the shade of the trees, and as the leaves brushed against his fur, a shiver ran down his spine. He had never felt something so soft, so alive. Instinct pulled at him, though it was unfamiliar. A voice deep within him whispered of things he had never known but somehow understood. "This is where you belong." Karen watched intently, barely breathing. She had been a part of countless rescues, had seen animals rehabilitated and reintroduced to their natural habitats. But this was different. This lion had never learned how to be a lion. He had never hunted, never marked his territory, never run with a pride. Would he know what to do? As if sensing her thoughts, the lion suddenly lifted his head and inhaled deeply. His golden eyes sharpened, His ears twitched. Then, for the first time, he let out a low, rumbling growl. Not out of fear, not out of pain, but out of understanding. Karen felt her chest tighten. He was remembering. Not in the way a human recalls a memory, but in the way something ancient and primal awakens inside a creature that has been kept from its true nature. The lion took another step deeper into the trees. The world that had been stolen from him was waiting just beyond the horizon, and for the first time in his life, he was ready to take it. The lion moved deeper into the trees, each step more certain than the last. The world around him was unfamiliar, but something inside him, something ancient and instinctual, pulled him forward. Karen and the other rescuers remained at a distance, watching in silence. They had spent months preparing for this moment, but none of them truly knew what would happen next. A lion born in captivity had never been taught how to survive in the wild. He had never hunted, never defended a territory, never learned the unspoken language of the savannah. Would he adapt? Or would the scars of his past keep him from becoming what he was always meant to be? The lion paused beneath the towering trees, his ears twitching at the rustling of leaves. His nose flared, catching scents he had never known before. Fresh earth, wildflowers, the distant musk of another animal. Every sound, every smell was new. Then, something changed. A breeze drifted through the trees, carrying with it a scent that made the lion freeze. His muscles tensed, his head lifted higher, his nostrils flaring wide. Karen held her breath. She had seen this reaction before in wild lions. It was the moment their instincts took over. The lion inhaled deeply, his golden eyes sharpening. His body went completely still, and for a long moment he simply listened. The rescuers waited, barely daring to move. And then, he moved. Not cautiously, not hesitantly, but with purpose. His muscles rippled as he stepped forward, his body low to the ground. His ears tilted forward, his tail twitched. It was the posture of a hunter. Karen felt something tighten in her chest. He wasn't just wandering anymore, he wasn't just exploring. He had found something. The lion crept forward, his massive paws silent against the forest floor. He didn't know what he was tracking, only that it was there, waiting for him, calling to something deep inside him. The rescuers remained frozen, watching as the once captive lion disappeared into the wild. And for the first time, Karen allowed herself to believe. He is going to make it. The lion moved like a ghost through the tall grass, his massive frame nearly silent despite his size. His muscles stretched in ways they never had before, no longer confined by tight cages and harsh concrete. He wasn't just walking anymore, he was stalking. Karen and the rescue team watched from a distance, barely breathing. They had known this moment might come, but none of them had dared to hope it would happen so soon. A lion who had never hunted, who had never learned the ways of the wild, was now moving like a predator born into the savannah. But instinct could only take him so far. The question that hung over them now was simple but heavy. Would he succeed? Or would he falter, still trapped by the chains of his past? The lion's eyes locked onto something up ahead. The wind shifted, and he caught the scent more clearly now. Small, familiar, prey. A herd of impalas grazed quietly near the tree line. Their bodies relaxed, unaware of the predator watching them from the shadows. The lion's ears twitched forward. His body lowered, his tail flicked once. Karen felt her heartbeat pick up. This was the test. The lion inched forward, his eyes locked onto a young impala standing slightly apart from the rest. He was doing everything right, staying downwind, keeping his movements slow, remaining hidden. It was the way a wild lion would hunt. But then, hesitation. He stopped. His muscles tensed, his claws flexed against the earth. He was close now, so close he could almost taste the chase. And yet, something held him back. Karen's heart ached as she watched him freeze, his breath uneven. He had never done this before. In the circus, he had been forced to perform, to act like a lion, but he had never been allowed to be one. The only meals he had ever known were tossed to him through iron bars. He had never hunted, never tasted the thrill of the wild. Would he do it? Could he? The impala suddenly lifted its head, ears flicking. It had sensed something. The lion had mere seconds to decide, act now or lose his chance. And then he moved. A powerful burst of muscle and instinct sent him forward. The impala bolted, and the lion gave chase. Karen and the team could only watch as the once broken lion, the one who had spent years in captivity, ran after his prey. Not because someone forced him, not because he had been trained to, but because for the first time in his life, he was truly free. The chase was wild, desperate, and unlike anything the lion had ever experienced before. His muscles burned as he sprinted, his body unaccustomed to such power, such freedom. The impala zigzagged through the trees, its slender legs carrying it with practiced speed. The lion, though strong, was still learning. His paws slipped on the loose earth, his movements just slightly uncoordinated, but still, he ran. Karen and the rescue team watched in stunned silence. None of them had expected him to hunt so soon. None of them knew if he even could. The impala was fast, too fast. Within seconds it had gained distance, leaping gracefully over a fallen log, its body a blur of motion. The lion, unfamiliar with obstacles in his path, hesitated for a split second, and that was all it took. The impala disappeared into the trees, leaving nothing but the rustling of leaves in its wake. The lion skidded to a stop, his chest heaving, his golden eyes wide with something that wasn't quite defeat, but wasn't victory either. He stood there for a long moment, his breath ragged. He had never run like that before, never felt the raw power of his own body, the pulse of the earth beneath his paws, the wind whipping through his mane. Karen felt a pang in her chest. She knew what he was feeling. He had been so close. The lion turned his head slightly, looking toward the humans in the distance. He didn't fully understand them, but somewhere deep inside, he knew they had brought him here. Karen took a slow step forward. "It's okay," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "You tried." The lion let out a slow breath, his ears flicking at the sound of her voice. Then something incredible happened. Instead of retreating, instead of giving up, the lion lifted his head and roared. It was deep, thunderous, and filled the entire valley. It wasn't a roar of anger or fear. It was something else. Determination. The rescue team exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from worry to something closer to pride. Karen felt tears sting her eyes. He wasn't giving up. He had tasted the chase, felt the thrill of the hunt, and even though he hadn't succeeded this time, he would try again. Because for the first time in his life, he knew what it meant to be wild. The lion stood tall, his powerful chest rising and falling as the echo of his roar faded into the vast wilderness. There was no audience, no whip waiting to punish him, no cage to retreat into, only the open world stretching endlessly before him. Karen placed a hand over her heart, watching in silent awe. He hadn't caught his prey, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that he had tried, that he had chosen to run, to hunt, to reclaim the part of himself that had been stolen for so many years. The lion turned away from where the impala had vanished, his golden eyes flickering with something new, not frustration, not failure, but understanding. For the first time, he knew what he was meant to do. He took a few slow steps back toward the grass, his tail flicking behind him. Then, suddenly, he collapsed. Not in exhaustion, but in something far more vulnerable. His body stretched across the earth, his massive paws curling into the soil. He rolled onto his back, just as he had done when he first stepped into the wild, letting the warmth of the sun soak into his fur. Karen let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. "He's happy," she whispered. One of the other rescuers, a man named Tom, wiped his face with his sleeve. "I think this is the first time in his life he's ever felt happy." For so long, this lion had only known chains, cruelty, and survival. He had been trained to perform, to obey, to submit. But out here, under the vast African sky, he was finally learning what it meant to live. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the sense of freedom, of possibility. The lion lay there for a long time, his eyes half closed, breathing in the life he had been denied for so long. And then, as if making a silent promise to himself, he stood again. But this time, there was no hesitation. He turned toward the trees, toward the unknown, toward his future, and walked forward, stronger than before. His steps were steady, filled with a confidence that hadn't been there before. Karen swallowed the lump in her throat. He wasn't looking back, because for the first time, he knew where he was going. The lion disappeared into the trees, his golden coat blending with the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. He did not hesitate. He did not turn back. He walked forward with the quiet strength of a creature who had finally found where he belonged. Karen and the rescue team stood in silence, watching as he stepped deeper into the wilderness. They had done what they could, rescued him from captivity, nursed him back to health, given him a chance at a life he had never known. But the rest, that was up to him now. Tom let out a breath, shaking his head in disbelief. "I never thought I'd see this," he murmured. A lion raised in captivity, learning to be wild again. Karen swallowed the lump in her throat, her voice soft. "Not learning." She glanced at Tom. "Remembering," because that's what this was. The lion had not been taught how to be wild. It had always been inside him, buried beneath years of suffering, locked away behind bars. He had just needed a chance to reclaim what was already his. The wind carried one last rustle of movement through the trees. And then he was gone. Karen exhaled slowly. The moment felt heavy, like the closing of a long, painful chapter. But not all endings were sad. This one. This was the beginning of something beautiful. She turned to the others, forcing a small smile. "He'll be okay." No one doubted her. They stayed for a little while longer, as if hoping for one last glimpse of him. But deep down, they all knew he wasn't coming back. He had found what he was looking for, and for the first time in his life, he was truly, finally, free. There are thousands of animals like him, creatures who have spent their entire lives in chains, longing for a life they have never known. Some will never get that chance, but you can change that. Support wildlife rescues, fight against illegal captivity, and give these animals the freedom they deserve. Because every creature, whether born in the wild or stolen from it, deserves a second chance.